I suspect that each one of us here have had the following thought at least once in their lives. If my boss, supervisor, if my spouse, my children, my parents, if my teacher, my professor, if my coworker asks me to do one more thing, I will either explode or say something I later regret. True? Yeah, I thought so. However, you notice I didn't say if Father Check that asked us to do one more thing, because the way it works out is when I do that, you just say, yes, I'll be glad to. Thanks for asking me. Spent a lot of time in the airport on Friday because of a canceled flight, which probably either gave me too much time or just enough time to think about this weekend's readings. And one of the threads that I noticed was an explanation about what I'll call generic qualities, activities of disciples. In Isaiah, we are reminded that whatever I say, whatever I do, I am an instrument of God in which God's glory is shown. So think about the conversations you've had over the past 24 hours. Were they reflective of the glory of God? The things I've done over the last 3 days, were they reflective of the glory of God? That's an ordinary, everyday task for disciples. Isaiah also reminds us that God is my strength. When and how have you experienced God's strength lately? And then the final message was, I know you've been lifting up people's spirits, but I have something more for you to do. I want you to be a light to the nations. More than what we're already doing. Just like that first conversation I talked about in my homily. And the image is, dream big of what I want you to do. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he simply reminds us in this introduction that we are called to be holy. We are called to be different. We're not called to be better. We are called to be different. And the difference is that we become the presence of God when people encounter us. They experience the divine in us. That's what it means to be called holy. To be holy. So that others can encounter God through us. In the gospel, John the Baptist says that part of our activities is to testify, to give testimony and witness to the presence of Christ in our midst. One of the things I find especially consoling about John's self-disclosure is when he says, you know what? I knew what I was supposed to do and I didn't do it. And it's like, well, that's pretty consoling for me. It's like I'm not doing it all the time, what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I said, those would be what I call the generic activities of disciples. What you and I are asked to do is to discover and discern what might God be calling us to specifically. So, for example, a number of people from our parish, from our diocese, from across our country, are gathering this week for the March for Life in Washington, D.C. to make known by a prayerful presence, a physical presence, by a dialogue presence of our belief and the sanctity of all human life, beginning the moment of conception. So there's a witness. People are doing more than what they normally might do. There's the parish standbys. We are a parish that ties with our brothers and sisters. We are a parish that has a very engaged St. Vincent de Paul Society. We are a parish that has an engaged and active parish council. But in light of the readings, the question would be, what more might we be asked to do? As we prepare for our Jubilee, one of the things that the Evangelization Committee is working in conjunction with the subcommittee for the Jubilee is to think about the people who are part of our parish boundaries, who've been here for a while, and yet we don't see them worshiping with us any longer. And to begin working on some strategies to reach out to them, to invite them back in this Jubilee year. Something a little more than what we normally do. Over the past 2+ years, we've had over 30 children and infants baptized here at the parish. Everybody keeps wondering, like, where are the young families? Well, there's 30 of them. Isaac's one, she's one. We have a few more around here. But in the same time frame of 2 years, we have not had one adult received or initiated into the church. And I know they're out there too. Why haven't we extended that invitation and more taken up the invitation to join us at the table? You've heard me mention before, in our 48 years as a parish, there's been only one vocation to the religious life from our parish, and there have been 3 men ordained for the permanent diaconate. What might we do more in light of those 2 areas of vocation? Plus supporting those who are single and continuing to support those who are married. Like I said, part of our invitation is to discern and discover what God might be calling you to, me to, our parish to, so that we could put into practice the generic activities of disciples and make them very specific. You know, part of that might be the words of today's psalm. They're very beautiful. Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will. That particular version that was proclaimed so wonderfully today has a nice feel about it. Rory Cooney, the composer, composed it when he was a freshman in college nearly 60 years ago. And yet, they're powerful words. And it's almost like one of these feel-good songs. My thought would be, and my challenge would be, is if you take those words seriously, be very careful, because God may take you at your word.